Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to crack open this ancient mystery, all about unity, division, and how one single rule might have changed, well, everything.
So, how did one little rule, buried in an ancient text, spark a historical mystery that's lasted for centuries? We're talking about a single chapter in the book of Deuteronomy, one that's had scholars scratching their heads for ages. And what's wild is that the answer, it reveals something pretty incredible about the blueprint for building a society from the ground up.
All right, so our mystery kicks off with this really specific and super strict command. You'll find it right in the heart of Deuteronomy, chapter 12.
And here it is. This is the central clue. It's a law that basically says all your sacred offerings, everything, has to happen in one chosen place. A single, central spot for all worship. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it?
Well, here's the twist. This simple rule created a huge headache for historians because it seems to fly in the face of other laws and even stories you find in the exact same collection of texts. In those other places, worshiping at multiple altars seems totally okay. So, what gives? This contradiction is what kicked off a massive historical whodunit.
So, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to look at the evidence the way scholars do. They've basically found that there are three distinct codes of law, all kind of woven into the first 5 books of the Bible. You got the covenant code from Exodus, the holiness code from Leviticus, and then the one we're really focusing on, the Deuteronomic code. Now, what's so fascinating here is that you have these 3 different legal voices all living in the same book, but they don't always agree, especially on one really key point. And that brings us to the altar controversy. The covenant code in Exodus pretty much says, hey, build an altar to God wherever you want. But then you get to Deuteronomy 12, and it's like, whoa, hold on, nope, only one place, period. This massive contradiction is what forced scholars to ask a really fundamental question. How in the world do you date an ancient text when there's no timestamp on it? I mean, to solve this mystery, you have to know which law came first. But how do you figure that out with texts this old? Well, believe it or not, the method they use is actually something you do all the time without even thinking about it. It's kind of like looking at cars. You see a 1920s Ford Model T, then a 60s Mustang, then some futuristic electric concept car. You don't need a date stamped on them to know the order they were made, right? You just know based on the design, the tech, the whole style. Well, scholars do the exact same thing with ancient texts. They look at the vocabulary, the style, the ideas, and the historical world it seems to be talking to. Okay, so once you have this method of textual dating, a whole line of historical detectives gets on the case. And as you can imagine, each one comes up with their own theory to solve the mystery. And this has been going on for a long time. We're talking over 150 years of debate. It really kicks off in the 19th century with a guy named DeWitt, and it keeps evolving, with newer scholars like Gordon Wenham adding fascinating new twists to the whole investigation. For a good long while, the prime suspect, if you will, was connected to a king named Josiah, who lived back in the 7th century BCE. This was the big theory, first put forward by that scholar DeWitt. And honestly, the evidence looked like a perfect fit. The story goes that during Josiah's reign, a book of the law is suddenly found in the temple. This book sparks this huge reform to centralize all worship in Jerusalem, which is exactly what Deuteronomy 12 demands. On top of that, you look at earlier biblical figures like Elijah or even Solomon, and they're building altars all over the place, and nobody bats an eye. So yeah, it looked like a total slam dunk. But then, more recent scholarship from people like Gordon Wenham started to poke holes in that theory. Wenham's idea was, wait a minute, what if the law doesn't mean one place for all time, forever and ever and amen? What if it just means one authorized place at a time? It's a subtle difference, for sure, but it completely changes the game. All this back and forth, this whole scholarly debate, it actually leads us to a really fascinating pivot point. Because maybe, just maybe, the most important question isn't when this thing was written, but why it was written. What was this law actually trying to do? And when you start looking at it that way, you realize this rule in Deuteronomy 12, it isn't just a religious regulation. It's actually a brilliant piece of social technology. Think of it like a tool or a blueprint designed specifically to organize people and build a nation. And here's how that engine for unification works. Step 1, you establish a central hub, one sacred place for everybody.
Now, the people, they're scattered all over the place in different tribes and cities. Those are your distributed nodes. But then, and this is the genius part, you create a unifying journey. Everyone, no matter who you are or where you live, has to travel to that central hub for the big, important rituals. And what does that do? It forges a shared identity. It takes all these different tribes and melts them into a single nation.
I mean, the genius of this blueprint is how it manages to create this powerful national unity without just stamping out all the local differences. It's about being one people, even if you come from many different places.
And that's the core principle, right? It's not about forcing everybody to be identical. It's about giving a diverse population a shared center to rally around. It shifts the mindset from just my tribe to our nation. And it was radically inclusive. The text goes out of its way to say everyone is included: sons, daughters, servants, the poor, the landless. It connects people from all over and then sends them back to their communities carrying that shared identity with them. So when you boil it all down, that's the formula. One God, one law, one chosen place, all designed to achieve one single goal: create one people. It's an incredibly powerful engine for building a nation.
Which kind of leaves us with a big question for our own world, doesn't it? What are the common ideas or the central places that unify our own diverse communities today? What are the chosen places, whether they're actual physical locations or maybe just powerful ideas that manage to forge unity out of all our diversity? What's the glue that holds us all together?